There are thousands upon thousands of children's Bibles on the market today. 5-Minute Bible Stories, the Catholic Children's Bible, the Protestant Children's Bible, the Adventure Bible, the Jesus Storybook Bible, My First Bible Story, a Child's Bible, the Beginner's Bible, God's Big Promises Bible Storybook, the Toddler's Bible, the Preschooler's Bible, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on. But what is a children's Bible, and what are the strategies that publishers and authors use to create them? In this video, we're going to look at the way that the Bible gets represented and reinterpreted as different kinds of bookish objects that are meant to be used by children. Defining children's Bible is a difficult task simply because there are so many children's Bibles that come in so many different forms. So let's start with the phrase itself, children's Bible. Of course, the term Bible itself is complicated and refers to many, many different things. But most basically, the Bible is different collections of texts written over about a 1,000-year period that are scripture for Jewish and Christian faith communities. That's as simple as we're ever going to get when it comes to the concept Bible. In the phrase children's Bible, this scriptural collection is modified by the adjective children. And so children's Bibles are the canonical collections of Christian and Jewish scripture intentionally recast to be used by or with children. I say used there because books and Bibles are not always read. And this is especially the case when it comes to children's Bibles. Many are meant to be viewed with or they're played with as physical objects. They may or may not be read at all. And so children's Bibles are a broad category of objects that are related to the Bible. But this broad category has recognizable features, and as we'll see, there are certain features and strategies that make children's Bibles recognizable as children's Bibles. And the first one of these is their titles. Titles are a paratextual feature. That is, they're not quite the text itself, but they're attached to the text, and they indicate what the bookish object is and what is inside that bookish object. More often than not, both the words children and Bible appear in the title of a given children's Bible. By using the term Bible in their title, many children's Bibles stake a claim to their biblicity. They're saying this object is itself a Bible, even if it doesn't contain all of the material or all of the content that you find in an adult Bible. By modifying the word Bible with adjectives like children's, kids, toddlers, preschoolers, or teens, they're indicating their intended audience, a non-adult audience. And historically, this has been the most common way to title children's Bibles, but it's not the only way that children's Bibles have been titled. The next most common way to title a children's Bible is to include stories or a related word in the title. In these cases, the title still relates the book to the Bible, but it does so in a different way. A book of stories suggests that its content derived from the Bible rather than the Bible itself. And what one generally finds in a book of Bible stories is, in fact, a selection of some narratives from the Hebrew Bible or the New Testament. Children's Bibles often clarify their purpose, audience, and strategy in another paratextual element, a preface or a foreword. Some children's Bibles contain prefaces written for the child reader, some contain prefaces written for the adult reader, and some contain separate prefaces for both. Like titles, prefaces help to present the text, but they do so more explicitly, and more often they directly state how the biblical object is related to the Bible in a way different than the title does. They often also indicate how this object has been prepared and what the purpose of this particular children biblical object is. Some prefaces make it clear that the book at hand is not, strictly speaking, a Bible. For example, in Ralph Milton's The Family Story Bible, the author, in a preface that's written for adults, states that the Bible is an interpretation. Milton encourages the adult reader to remember that the stories in this book come from the Bible, but via my imaginations. At times, you may wonder, where is this guy in the Bible coming from? So check the original story out in the Bible. For Milton, these stories are from the Bible, but they are not the Bible itself. Other prefaces to Children's Bible are not so explicit that the Children's Bible at hand is not the Bible. This Children's Bible has a preface titled A Letter to Adult Friends, in addition to its Letter to Young Friends. In the Letter to Adult Friends, the author states that to keep the text interesting and meaningful, some passages were excluded. These were genealogies, repetitive passages, parts of long speeches, detailed laws and rituals, extremely abstract and symbolic passages, sexual scenes, and graphic violence. This Bible is to be read like a children's chapter book. They're equivalent to the adult novel. It's written at approximately a second grade reading level. So even though this Bible doesn't have all of the parts of an adult Bible, it claims itself as Bible. And this preface exemplifies another strategy of prefaces to children's Bibles. It indicates how the biblical text was handled and modified. In this case, it was modified via omission, which is an incredibly common strategy in children's Bibles. Because most children's Bibles are collections, they must select what material to include and what material to omit. The long history of children's Bibles has established a sort of canon of children's Bible stories, what you might expect to find in the most comprehensive children's Bibles today. And protecting the innocence of children is an affordance of children's Bibles, and it allows authors, illustrators, translators, and epitomizers to do all kinds of theological and social work with the Bible. If you're creating a child's objects, there are certain things that you don't want attached to that object, but those things are often culturally conditioned. What's considered inappropriate for children in one culture might be considered appropriate for children in another culture. And so children's Bibles often tell us as much about the cultures and times in which they're produced as they do about the content of the Bible in it itself. They also tell us much about the ideology and theology of the culture and the producer of a given children's Bible. And often children's Bibles will indicate their ideological or theological purposes in their prefaces. Very often, the stated purpose is to instill a love of Scripture from a very young age. So, the Toddler's Bible says, at the toddler age, he learns to talk, she learns to walk, and they learn to love God or ignore him. A lifetime of knowing and loving God is formed or missed at this early toddler age. A lifetime of Bible reading, Bible study, Bible application begins here. What you do with your toddler is for all of life or for all eternity. Finally, in their prefaces, many children's Bibles will indicate what it is that makes this particular object successful or particularly engaging. And very often, the author indicates that it's their own use of these retold stories with or by their own children that is the proof of the pudding. So, the author of the Preschooler's Bible, who's also the author of the Toddler's Bible, not God, but a man named Victor Beers, writes that the text of the Preschooler's Bible flows from the heart of an author with 40 years of parenting experience, who has 5 children who all grew to delight in the Lord and his word, and 11 years of grandparenting experience, all 8 of whom are well on their way to the delights of his word and his presence. So, the purpose of the Toddler Bible, the proof of the Toddler Bible, is how it has worked for one particular parent and grandparent. And this is a trope that gets repeated in various children's Bibles. They are written by parents who have used the stories told in the same way that are told in this particular children's Bible. Material in children's Bibles is selected and omitted for ideological and theological purposes. In addition to selecting and omitting biblical content, children's Bibles embellish the biblical text, filling in gaps or adding details that aren't there in the adult version. We've already seen this with Ralph Milton's Family Story Bible. They also do this by presenting explicit or implicit moral and or theological interpretations about the biblical content that is presented. So Genesis 1 through 3 gets presented as a story about making right choices. Or the story of the binding and sacrifice of Isaac, also called the Akedah, is, in many Christians' children's Bibles, a theological forebearer to Jesus' sacrifice for sin. Some children's Bibles market themselves as promoting certain moralities and theologies, while others do so without being so explicit that they are doing just that. One way that children's Bibles are able to more clearly present certain interpretations is by paraphrasing the biblical text. Rather than presenting a standard translation, such as the NIV, the NRSV, or the New Living Translation, or some other such, authors of children's Bibles retell Scripture, and especially stories from Scripture, in their own words. They might be dependent on one English translation or another, but ultimately the words are changed to such an extent that they're no longer recognizable as coming from one particular English translation. Part and parcel with this is the omission of chapter and versification in many children's Bibles. The vast majority of children's Bibles don't offer verse references for their individual sentences because those individual sentences are not taken directly from the biblical text. They're retellings or paraphrases. Though many children's Bibles still do retain chapter verses, and they often, especially the chapters, will append them to the title of each individual story. So you have a paraphrased title of what's to follow with the biblical chapters that are associated with it attached directly to that title. And some also retain their verse divisions, and this is especially the case for children's Bibles that are meant to be used by older kids and preteens. These Bibles are also usually dependent on or directly reproduce an established English translation of the Bible. Most often, this is an easy-to-read version like the NIV or the NLT. Children's Bibles for teens, for older children and for preteens stand somewhere between children's Bibles proper and other kinds of value-added Bibles. Those Bibles that include various reading helps like non-Bible text boxes with historical information, questions, devotional prayers, and other kinds of materials are meant to facilitate Bible use. These Bibles, especially children's Bibles, come in a variety of shapes and sizes, but most of their physical features are meant to work together to facilitate use by young children. Some children's Bibles are smaller than a standard book so that they can easily be held in small hands. Others are larger than normal books so that they can be read and viewed in a family reading setting. The font size also tends to be larger as an aid both to child's reading and communal reading with an adult. This allows the pictures to be more easily seen by more than one person at one time. And as is common of other children's books, children's Bibles often contain glossy pages and they're often brightly colored. In the modern printing age, in which full color page printing is easier than ever, it's not uncommon for children's Bibles to have very little white space on a page at all. Perhaps the thing that most unites and exemplifies children's Bibles, what makes a children's Bible, are its illustrations. You'd be hard-pressed to find a children's Bible today that does not have a visual, pictorial component to it. And this has been the case throughout the history of children's Bibles. One of the things that sets children's Bibles apart, one of the main affordances of it as a medium, is that it is simultaneously a visual and a textual representation of the Bible. And the visual elements often do more work for making meaning than the text does. Very often, the pictures have their own story to tell. The layout of pictures and text varies wildly between children's Bibles and has changed over the years with the changes in printing practices, capabilities, and technologies. Some children's Bibles are sparsely illustrated. This is the case with Hurlburt's Story of the Bible, a massively popular children's Bible from the first half of the 20th century. It retold 168 stories from the Bible in compelling prose. Most of these stories contained just one image associated with them. On the other end of the spectrum, and more characteristic of late 20th and early 21st century children's Bibles, is the illustrations overtaking the text, such as the case here with the Pray and Play Bible. This Bible also represents a recent trend in children's Bible illustrations, their cartoonification. Just as children's Bibles vary in how they handle and present their texts, they also vary with respect to how aesthetically pleasing or not aesthetically pleasing their illustrations are or are not. Some children's Bibles are meant to showcase the visual artist's beautiful work, while other children's Bibles are meant to be bright and shiny and glossy and simply meant to be eye candy. It's not that one or the other of these is necessarily better, they simply serve different purposes in different settings. The medium is the message. At the end of the day, children's Bibles are interpretive and artistic works of art in their own right. They come in a variety of forms, serve a variety of purposes, but they all represent or represent the Bible or parts of the Bible in a way that is meant to be engaged and used by children.